Welcome to Boxing Revival. In this video presentation, I have ranked the top 10 greatest boxers of the 1940s. This decade was known as the age of World War II, with many sporting events affected. But this war did not stop boxing from having great fights. With many historic fights, and a lot of great rivalries happened in this decade, such as the Sugar Ray Robinson vs. Jake LaMotta rivalry, and the trilogy of Tony Zale and Rocky Graziano. Joe Louis dominated the heavyweight division. Sugar Ray Robinson ruled the welterweight. Manuel Ortiz reigned in the bantamweight, and the featherweight division belongs to Willie Pep. There are a lot of legendary boxers in this decade, with many boxing legends now inducted in the International Hall of Fame. This top 10 is not enough to list down all the great boxers in this decade, so we are including the honorable mentions list. The boxers who have been great in this decade, but just misses out on the top 10. The ratings, and their rankings, was purely based on their career achievements in the decade. So let's find out the top 10 greatest boxers of the 1940s. At number 10, the Pittsburgh Kid, Billy Conn. He was the world light heavyweight champion from 1939 to 1940. He was named as the Fighter of the Year by the Ring magazine in 1940. And in 1941, he challenged Joe Louis for the world heavyweight title. But after winning the first 12 rounds, he was knocked out by Joe Louis in round 13. He was defeated by Louis again in their rematch in 1946. During the decade, he also defeated Gus Lesniewicz, Lee Savold, and Tony Zale. At number 9, the Raging Bull, Jake LaMotta. In 1949, he defeated Marcel Cerdan to win the world middleweight title, and he defended the title until 1951. LaMotta was famously known for his fights with Sugar Ray Robinson. And in 1943, he gave Robinson the first loss of his career. LaMotta was considered to have one of the strongest chins in boxing history. At number 8, Sandy Sadler. He was the world featherweight champion from 1948 to 1949, when he knocked out Willie Pep, and reigned as the world super featherweight champion from 1949 to 1950. During the decade, he also defeated a lot of great boxers, such as Patty DeMarco, Joe Brown, and Orlando Zaluta. At number 7, the Man of Steel, Tony Zale. He was a two-time world middleweight champion from 1940 to 1948, and was named as the Fighter of the Year in 1946. Tony Zale was known for his epic trilogy with Rocky Graziano, winning the first and the third fight. During his reign, he defeated former champions Fred Apostoli, Al Hostak, and Georgie Abrams. At number 6, Ike Williams. In 1945, he defeated Juan Zareta to win the world lightweight title, and defended it 8 times until 1951. He was named as the Fighter of the Year in 1948. During his great career, he defeated Sammy Angut, Johnny Bratone, Enrique Bolanos, Kid Gavilan, Bo Jack, and Bob Montgomery. Williams was considered as one of the greatest lightweight champion of all time. At number 5, Manuel Ortiz. The American legend was a two-time world bantamweight champion, In 1942, he defeated Lou Salica to win the bantamweight title. He defended it 15 times, before losing to Harold Dade in 1947. But he regained the title in their rematch, and defended the title 5 more times, until 1950. Manuel Ortiz was one of the greatest bantamweight champion of all time. At number 4, the Cincinnati Cobra, Ezzard Charles. Despite the fact that he never fought, and never won a light heavyweight title, he was still considered as one of the greatest boxers of the division. In 1949, he defeated Jersey Joe Walcott to win the vacant world heavyweight title. Charles defended the title until 1951. During the decade, he defeated Archie Moore, Joey Maxim, and Jimmy Bivens 3 times. Charlie Burley, and Lloyd Marshall 2 times. Ezzard Charles was one of the best, pound-for-pound boxer of all time. Before we move to the top 3, let's take a look at our honorable mentions, the boxers who misses out on the top 10, but produces great careers in the decade. In this list, is the singing Irishman, Rinty Monaghan. He was the world flyweight champion, from 1947 to 1950, before retiring with a lung disease. During the decade, he defeated flyweight champions Jackie Patterson, Dodo Marino, and Terry Allen. Also in this list, was the Black Murderers Row. They were the most exclusive men's club the boxing has ever known. This group was composed of African Americans, who was so good, so tough, and was so feared, that they never able to receive a world title shot. Instead, they fought each other a total of 62 times. The greatest of this group, Charlie Burley. He was considered as one of the greatest boxers to never fight for a world title. He defeated 3 future world champions, Fritzy Zivik, Billy Seuss, and Archie Moore, and was said to be avoided by many champions during his time. He was never stopped in his 98 professional fights. Also in this group, was Lloyd Marshall. The peak of his career was during the World War II, so he never got the chance to challenge for a world title. During the decade, he defeated many great boxers, such as Charlie Burley, Babe Briscoe, Jake LaMotta, and Ezzard Charles. Also in this group, was Holman Williams. Another boxer who never won a world title, Williams was considered by legendary trainer Eddie Futch as the greatest technician the boxing has ever produced. During his career, he defeated Charlie Burley, Lloyd Marshall, Archie Moore, and Bob Satterfield. The other members of the Black Murderers Row was the Cuckoo Kid, Louis Hardwick. The Puerto Rican-American boxer fought a total of 244 professional fights. Also in this group was Jack Chase. He was rated as high as number 2 in the middleweight division, but never fought for the world title. Up next was Eddie Booker. He was the first boxer to knock out the legendary Archie Moore. Up next was Aaron Wade. He defeated Oakland Billy Smith 3 times. And the last member of the Murderers Row, Burt Lytle. He famously lost a controversial decision against Jake LaMotta. Up next is Homicide Hank, Henry Armstrong. Although his best years was in the 1930s, Armstrong still deserves a mention in this list. He defended his welterweight title 6 times, in 1940, held to a controversial draw with middleweight champion Ceferino Garcia, and was named as the Fighter of the Year by the Boxing Writers of America. but he suffered 9 losses, from 1941 until his retirement in 1945. But overall, Henry Armstrong was still one of the best boxers of all time. Up next is Bo Jack. The American boxer was the Fighter of the Year by the Ring magazine in 1944. He was a 2-time world lightweight champion from 1942 to 1944. Jack fought 21 times in the famous Madison Square Garden. During his reign, he defeated Fritz Zivic, Sammy Angat, Bob Montgomery, and Juan Zareta. Up next is Marcel Cerdan. He was considered as one of the greatest boxers from France. He reigned as the world middleweight champion from 1948 to 1949, when he defeated Tony Zale. But in 1949, at only 33 years old, he died in an airplane crash. He has a great boxing record, losing only 4 times during his 117 professional fights. Also in this list is the old mongoose, Archie Moore. Although his best years was in the 1950s, and he did not win a title in this decade, Archie Moore deserves a mention in this list. During the decade, he defeated Charlie Doc Williams, Harold Johnson, Jimmy Bivens, Bob Satterfield, Holman Williams, Coco Kidd, and Lloyd Marshall. Up next is Jersey Joe Walcott. In this decade, he unsuccessfully challenged for the world heavyweight title 3 times. And in 1949, in his first title fight, despite dropping Joe Louis in round 1 and round 4, he still loses by a controversial decision. During the decade, he defeated Joey Maxim, Elmer Ray, Jimmy Bivens, and Joe Baxi. Up next is Rocky Graziano. The Italian-American boxer was one of the hardest punchers in boxing history. He was the world middleweight champion from 1947 to 1948, when he defeated Tony Zale in the second fight of their epic trilogy, which was named as the Fight of the Year by the Ring magazine. Up next is Fritz Zivic. The Croatian-American boxer won the world welterweight title in 1940 when he defeated Henry Armstrong. In their rematch in 1941, he stopped Armstrong for the first time in his career. During the decade, he also defeated Sammy Angat, Albummy Davis, and Lou Jenkins. Up next is Gus Lesniewicz. The American boxer won the light heavyweight title in 1941 when he defeated Anton Christopheridis, before losing the title to Freddie Mills in 1948. He was named as the Fighter of the Year by the Ring magazine in 1947. During the decade, he also defeated Tammy Moriello, Emilio Bacchina, and Billy Fox. Up next is Bob Montgomery. In 1943 and 1944, he defeated Bo Jack for the world lightweight titles. He also defeated Ike Williams, Fritz Zivic, and Lou Jenkins. Up next is Jackie Patterson. He was the world flyweight champion from 1943 to 1947. He was also the first ever Southpaw champion in the flyweight division. During the decade, he defeated Peter Kane, Jim Brady, and Theo Medina. Up next is Fearless, Freddie Mills. The British boxer was the world light heavyweight champion from 1948 to 1950. He was the most famous British boxer after the World War II. During the decade, he defeated Gus Lesniewicz, Jack London, and Len Harvey. Up next is the clutch, Sammy Angat. He was the former world lightweight champion, who fought the best boxers in the welterweight and the lightweight divisions. He holds wins over Bob Montgomery, Ike Williams, Willie Pep, Lou Jenkins, and Johnny Bertone. Up next is Jimmy Bivens. The American boxer never fought and never won a world title in his career, despite being the #1 contender in the light heavyweight and the heavyweight divisions. He defeated 8 world champions during the decade, including Gus Lesniewicz, Tammy Moriello, Joey Maxim, Archie Moore, and Ezzard Charles. Up next was the Cuban Hawk, Kid Gavilan. Although his championship and dominant years was in the 1950s, Kid Gavilan also has a great career in this decade. He defeated lightweight champions, Ike Williams and Bo Jack, and hold wins over top contenders, such as Charlie Williams, Tommy Bell, and Rocky Castellani. At number 3, the defensive wizard, Willie Pep. The American legend was considered as the greatest featherweight champion of all time. He was a 2-time world champion from 1942 to 1950, and was named as the Fighter of the Year in 1945 by The Ring magazine. Willie Pep dominated the featherweight division with his speed, elusiveness, and his defensive intelligence. During the decade, he defeated a lot of former champions, such as Sandy Sadler, Sal Bartolo, Phil Terranova, Joey Archibald, Chalky Wright, Patty DeMarco, and Manuel Ortiz. At number 2, the Brown Bomber, Joe Louis. He was considered as one of the greatest heavyweight champion of all time, and dominated the division from 1937 to 1949, which is the longest single reign in the heavyweight history. He was named as the Fighter of the Year in 1941. During his reign in the decade, he defeated Jersey Joe Walcott, Billy Conn, Arturo Godoy, Al McCoy, Abe Simon, Buddy Bear, and Tammy Moriello. His impact was also felt outside the ring, and was considered as the first African American to achieve a national recognition in the United States. At number 1, Sugar Ray Robinson. He was considered as the greatest boxer of all time, and he was the reason why the Boxing Analyst had to create the pound-for-pound rankings. From 1943 to 1951, Robinson went on a 91-fight unbeaten streak, and from 1946 to 1951, he held the welterweight world title. He was named as the Fighter of the Year in 1942 and the 1940s Fighter of the Decade by The Ring magazine. During the decade, he defeated Jake LaMotta 4 times, and also defeated many champions, such as Henry Armstrong, Kid Gavilan, Sammy Angat, Marty Servo, Fritzy Zivic, and Tommy Bell. Robinson was also considered as the greatest welterweight champion of all time. This is boxing. Boxing lives on. Continue to support this beautiful and exciting sport. Thank you for watching. For more boxing stories, boxing fights, and boxing news, subscribe on this channel. Click the notification bell for more updates. Because in this channel, together we will revive the boxing world.